Welcome to the Missoula Peace Network. My name is Anita Doyle of the Jeannette Rankin Peace Resource Center. The program that you're about to see, Citizen Diplomacy, is the first in an ongoing series of programs related to peace and justice, which will be aired on MCAT every other week. This is a permanent time slot, and it is open to anyone in the peace and environmental community that wishes to produce a program to put on the show. Please contact MCAT if you'd like to participate in this. The program today, as I mentioned, is on citizen diplomacy. We have with us in the studio a couple of guests, local Missoula people who have had recent experience in being themselves individual diplomats for peace in the Middle East. With us today in the studio, Rick Shrum and Todd Randolph. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick Shrum is a graduate student in environmental economics at the university, is a member of the Student Coalition for Social Responsibility, is a world citizen, and has been showing slides recently around the Missoula area on your recent trip to Iran and Jordan. Is that right?
Right, Iraq.
Right, right. Excuse me. Excuse me, right.
That's an easy one.
Yeah. Todd Randolph has had a fair amount of experience as a citizen diplomat. You've been involved, Todd, as I'm aware of, in a number of different initiatives, your most recent one being as a member of the Gulf Peace Team. So we'll be anxious to hear about that. Todd is a very active community member here in Missoula and in western Montana. He's a former assault pilot in Vietnam and has much military experience. And so it'll be interesting to hear from you, Todd, where that movement came for you from going from a military perspective to a peace perspective. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with you, Todd. Tell us about how that movement did happen for you. How did you go from being somebody obviously very deeply involved in the military to someone who now sort of sees it as your job to allow peace to grow in the world?
Well, I definitely, it was a journey to get from where I was to where I am now. And the journey for me started when I was about 4 years old, living near an air base at the end of World War II as a small, impressionable young man, seeing these Air Force bombers coming back from Europe and from the Pacific. And I can remember laying on the ground, looking up at these planes coming over, thinking how wonderful it would be to fly and fight and shoot. I had a dream as early as I can remember to be a pilot, and I tried when I was here in Montana going to college, I tried to get in various branches of the service so I could become a pilot. I was turned down in effect by the Navy and later by the Air Force, and finally in about 1965 the Army accepted me into their ROTC program here in Missoula with the stipulation that I would be able to go to flight school. I did go to flight school, and my dream came true to be a pilot. The problem was, right after flight school in 1967, I was sent to Vietnam, and indeed my military career was not quite as extensive as you indicated. I lasted 3 weeks before I was hit by 8 bullets from a machine gun and attempting to take off during an ambush. From that point, I have over the years become increasingly active and concerned with peace, especially as history has revealed the horrible waste in Vietnam. I have become more and more involved, like I say, in the peace movement. About 3 years ago, my career as a citizen diplomat began when I was invited to go back to Vietnam with a group that was going to try to locate a minefield and destroy this minefield because it was killing Vietnamese people, and I felt a very strong call when I heard that I might be able to go with this group. I really, you know, I really felt summoned to go, and that it was something that I had to do. Well, it turned out I got cut from that trip. There wasn't enough funding for me. I wasn't an engineer. I didn't know where the mines were. I was just going to go and write about it and, you know, be kind of like a reporter. So that got me started, and a few weeks after I found out I wasn't going to Vietnam, I was given an opportunity to go with 19 combat veterans from Vietnam. Keep in mind now, this was already like 20 years or so after my experience in Vietnam. I was invited to go to the Soviet Union, to Kazakhstan, and to meet with Soviet veterans from the war in Afghanistan. I didn't know what I was getting into at the time, but now that I've had a few years to reflect back on what we did in the Soviet Union, I would have to say I feel that the topic we're talking about here, citizen diplomacy, is a very viable way to keep people from continually blowing each other up. Citizen diplomacy is something that, to me, it's a negotiation, it's an interaction between people. It ends in hugs instead of bombs, and I've said that many times. And I also have had the opportunity now to be on the other end of citizen diplomacy, in that many, many people now have come from the Soviet Union to America and then gone back and told their friends what we were like. So I feel like I've said a lot here, and I maybe want to back off and you have the question.
Yeah. Well, why don't we, before you tell us about your most recent experience at the Iraq-Kuwaiti border, why don't we hear from you, Rick, about how you got into this field, acting as a citizen diplomat in the Middle East, especially right now as the Persian Gulf crisis was coming to a head?
Well, it was a natural progression for me. I started out being very concerned on August 2nd, like everyone else was, that Iraq had invaded Kuwait, and was really able to keep up with that. I was a student, I had time, and I really kept myself well informed. And then as the Student Coalition for Social Responsibility formed on campus at the end of October, I got very involved in that, and the organizing end as well as the participating end, and really got caught up in it, I guess you could say. And through those connections that I made in the coalition, networking to other campuses, other people around the country, my name was passed on to the group that I ended up going on the trip with, which was the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And they were looking to get a group of student activists together to go, because they felt that the student movement could have a real effect on hoping to avoid the conflict that has since ensued. And so I got involved that way. I took that last step. I just faced the situation of being faced with having an application in front of me to go on a trip like this, and I said, well, geez, you've been going down this path, and it was a natural progression for me to take that step. And I feel, as Todd does, that citizen diplomacy and that communication, channels of communication that are open through citizen diplomacy are the way to really get to some solutions.
Now, was the Persian Gulf crisis your first excursion into peace work, so to speak, or had you been involved previously in other efforts?
It's my first physical participation. I've been on many emotional journeys to places around the world, Central America. I've in last 3 or 4 years, my consciousness has really been raised of world events, and really started to form my own view of myself as a world citizen. And I've become aware in that, but this is the first actual trip that I've taken.
Right. Well, let's talk about your trip a little bit. Fellowship of Reconciliation pinpointed 10 student leaders that they wanted to go over there. And the idea was, as I understand it, for you to make contact with Iraqi officials and also ordinary citizens, to make that contact, to open up channels of communication. And what else? Was there why student activists in particular did they want?
Well, this was the third trip that FOR,
Okay.
Fellowship of Reconciliation, had put together.
Mm-hmm.
The first two were consisted of clergy was in one of them, and the other one were just citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And they felt that very strongly, I think from a historical perspective, that the student movement and the universities and colleges in the country could play a major part in helping to avoid what has ensued. And they called for applications. It wasn't just, they didn't just say, do you want to go? They had a call for applications through the network, loose network that had formed out of the student movement in the country. And they really felt that it would also be empowering for the student movement to have a resource geographically spread. We were from 10 different universities, 10 different states, to have a resource to come back with the message and actual firsthand experience, and not bring back just an academic view, but bring back something that was emotional, an emotional experience. And they felt that that could really work to empower the student movement at home. And I shared that view. That was what really led me to decide to commit to a trip like this, was that potential of coming back and empowering myself, the movement, and also spreading the message around through the slideshows that I've been doing.
Great, good. Now, for both of you, this experience happened before war actually broke out in the Middle East. Both of these efforts, as I understand them, were efforts to involve the American populace in seeing who these people were, in an effort to, as you say, empower us to try to put a stop to the war preparations, and to bring a halt to what seemed to be, and we now know was, sort of a one-track path to war. It'll be interesting now to view these slides knowing what has in fact transpired since that time. But I'm interested, before we look at your slides, having gone over there with the hope that you could make a difference, that you could be a voice of sanity in those very, very difficult and troubling times. How did it feel for you when the war actually started, having just had that experience over there? Do you want to respond to that, Todd?
I really felt sick. I mean, I just almost was in tears on the 17th when the bombing started, and I didn't know it at the time, but a friend of mine was in the El Rashid Hotel when the bombs started to fall, and he said something to the effect, and I later learned about it. He said, now we have 1,000 points of light. Why do they have to come from rockets and bombs? We are capable of so much greater things than what we have just seen in the Middle East. And again, I wouldn't have been there if I didn't believe that myself and many, many other people could have done something to make a difference. Some of the concrete things that we did, I believe, and this is just strictly my opinion, I can't prove it, but I think a lot of Iraqi soldiers are alive today because of us, and they were among the defectors who got, the first chance they had to surrender, they did. Because remember, between Rick's group and my group, there was something. Well, the Gulf Peace Team, we had people from 22 nations, approximately 150 people, most of them on the border, all of us having constant contact with Iraqi soldiers, business people, and civilians. And I know it made a difference. If it saved one life, I'll accept that. But I think we did better.
But you, Rick, where were you when the bombs actually started to fall, and what were you feeling at that time?
Well, I was in Minneapolis Airport on my way back. We arrived in New York City on the 16th in the morning, about 10 in the morning, having left Amman, Jordan, at midnight of the 15th. And I was changing planes to get on a plane from Minneapolis to Missoula. And I was walking by a shoe shine booth, and there were people crowded around it, and I could imagine that many people wanted to have their shoes shined. So I walked over, and there was news that the war had started. We all remember that time, and it was very devastating. For one thing, I had been in transit for 36 hours, and I was exhausted. So I was on an emotional roller coaster anyway. And when I heard that news, the first things I thought of were the people that you'll see in the slides that are coming up, the children, and the victims I was a victim. We were all victims. The Iraqi citizens were victims. And that's what went through my mind. But I didn't feel any sense that I had failed in my mission. Partly or mainly because our mission was defined before we went in a meeting in JFK Airport that we had a 12-hour meeting when my group got together. The first time we had ever met, we went through 12 hours of orientation, I guess you could call it, and had long, 3-4 hour discussion on exactly what we were going over to do, what we were going to hope to accomplish, and looking at our expectations just so we wouldn't have this feeling of really failing. And I resolved with myself that I wasn't going to take it personal if the war started. It wasn't on my shoulders. I was there to meet people and to get a sense of their perspective, give them my perspective, see places, and get that channel of dialogue going. I firmly believe that citizen diplomacy has a very important role to play, but I see that role as empowering people so that they then can go to their governments to really resolve the problems, because the problems, even if they're resolved on the citizen level, the impetus has to come from the citizens to the government, and the government has to resolve these through their own diplomatic channels. And my sense was that that's where the burden was, and my sense is that's what's failed. We accomplished what we were there to do, and the governments have failed in listening to the people and taking that upon themselves to solve this in a way other than war.
Good. Todd, I'd like to see your slides. Can you give us some background on the Gulf Peace Team? How did it come about, and how did you find out about it?
The Gulf Peace Team was formed right early in August as a response to the situation in Kuwait. It's a group in London, and I really don't know an awful lot about it, but they were involved in fundraising, and it was their goal to get as many, at one point, to get as many as maybe 1,000 people from around the world, from many, many countries, to get these people together to form a human shield. Some people, for some reason, have objected to that particular description, but whatever, these people were to stand on the border between the Army of Iraq and the combined forces, and that camp, you'll see on the map here in a minute, that camp was just a little bit east of Jordan, and it was right on the Saudi-Iraq border, but it was inside Iraq, about 1 mile from the border. So at that point, what finally happened, because everyone who was supposed to go there didn't get there, and things changed, but as I understand it, there were, I'll say, close to 100 people from 20 nations, possibly 22 nations, that actually were on the border as either a human shield, or if you wish to call it witness for peace or some other term, fine, but they were there, and some of these people you will see were grandmothers and great-grandmothers.
So the idea was that these people were putting their bodies on the line. Was the idea that the armies would not dare to shoot across this contingency of people? Was that the hope, that they would form that kind of a barrier to hostility?
I think, yes, there was. I can only speak for myself. I hate to say that all the time, but it's my opinion that, yeah, they felt that the armies would respect their being there, because we weren't there to demonstrate for the United States, and we weren't there because we were against Iraq. We were there because we were against the war, and we didn't want to see anybody killed on either side. And both sides respected that, because we were treated, we were never threatened by the combined forces, the people that were on the border camp, and they were, in fact, asked several times after the war started. These people were asked to leave Iraq, or to leave the camp and go back to Baghdad, and they refused. And the Iraqi soldiers said, "Well, it's very dangerous, but if you want to stay," they let them stay. That happened once, possibly twice, and finally, on the third occasion, the Iraqs did make everyone leave the camp because it was just too dangerous.
At what point was that?
That was about the 25th of January. So in other words, some of these people you'll be seeing in the pictures here were on the border for the first 2 weeks of the war, approximately January 17th through the 25th.
Do you have any knowledge about whether that area was strafed or,
Only
subjected
after the peace, Gulf Peace Team people left. I don't know, Rick, did you have anybody on the Were any of your people on the border camp? No, because
No,
your mission was a little
right.
different. Okay, but anyway, everybody left, nobody was hurt. I understand the camp was overrun by the Iraqis after we left, but I mean, it was a couple football fields in size, and so I mean, they just did whatever militarily they had to do at that point, but we were, our people were safe and out by that time.
And then it remained empty for the duration of the war, as far as you know?
As far as I know. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. It was militarily not a particularly significant piece of ground. Religiously, however, it was very significant because it has for thousands of years been a stopping for the pilgrims on their way south to Mecca from Iraq, south to Mecca, and of course back. It has been a camping place.
All right. Well, let's take a look at your slides. See what you got.
Okay, well, if we're on to the first slide here, you see two women. I believe they're both German. One woman, you'll notice by her right hand, is part of a crutch. And the reason I'm showing you this particular slide is that the Gulf Peace Team was made up of a tremendous variety of people. And little old ladies, I'll show you in a moment a picture of a Catholic priest. But there were people from 22 nations, about 150 of us, and very great range and diversity of human beings. This is taken in a place where we had our meals while we were waiting for the bus to take us to the peace camp. And I would say the food was extremely good in light of the fact that they were suffering from the embargo already. There was always plenty of food. There wasn't always a great diversity. We had a lot of pita bread, and I'm sure Rick knows about that.
Pita bread for breakfast.
This next slide is, these are two of the fellows that I'm on the left and two of the fellows on the right. One is from Washington, and the big guy in the center is from Vermont. The fellow on the right works in computers. The large man in the center does a lot of this type of thing. He was just in Central America before he went to Baghdad. I don't know if it's showing up really good on the screen, but in the back, at the end of the street, is a marble building, beautiful white marble building with a blue turquoise colored dome. And it was one of many, and you'll see some other pictures here, but some just absolutely beautiful buildings in Baghdad.
That's actually a mosque.
Yeah, I thought it.
Construction.
I thought it might be. And
Do we know whether that building is still standing at this point? Or?
I haven't gotten any word, but I use this similar slide in my slideshow, and I point out the fact that there's a communications tower that was about 30 yards to the right of that.
and that was hit.
And I imagine, I don't know for
Yeah.
sure, but I
We
would
can see
assume.
that tall tower in
I
the back
think
there?
that
Is
was
that what
hit.
that is?
Oh, another interesting thing about this picture, if just to the right of us is the Tigris River. Just on the other side of the building there that you see the corner of the building on the right, on the other side of that is a little berm, and then there's the Tigris River.
And this is where I stayed the whole time I was in Baghdad.
Was at that
this camp.
particular...
This is
Okay.
Rick and I at probably taken around the 10th, would you say, Rick, maybe?
It was, must have been the 11th.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I got there on the 10th.
Well, that's close enough anyway. And
Now this slide is great to have in view of the fact that you're both together in it. I just want to remind viewers that you were on very different trips, both of you.
Yeah.
Went at different times and not exactly for the same purpose. You, Todd, were at the Gulf Peace Team camp, and Rick was on another thing, so it's somewhat coincidental that you both ended up in this picture at this time.
As we were joking earlier, a lot of people from Missoula realize if you want to meet somebody from Missoula, just go overseas,
that's
go to a
right.
jungle, go to
Right.
Alaska.
Yeah.
That's happened to me more than once. The gentleman on my left is Father Kevin Doheny. He's Irish. His current address is London, England. He's a Catholic priest, and he has worked with Mother Teresa for 18 years. Mother Teresa is a Nobel Prize winning Catholic sister who has worked in India and who has affected the lives of probably millions of people around the world. And this man has been able to work with her and also with refugees from around the world. It was a tremendous honor and wonderful time to be able to spend and talk with this gentleman. These are some men that worked in the restaurant where we took our meals while we were in the staging area at Baghdad. And this was at the World Peace and Friendship Camp you just saw a picture of a moment ago. The fella, particularly on my right, is smiling, and I want to point out that it was really a genuine smile, and that the hospitality and the friendship that I experienced, not only at the World Peace and Friendship Camp, but on the streets of Baghdad and everywhere I went in Iraq, the hospitality was very genuine. It was often sacrificial, and just again and again, it was remarkable.
I'd like to echo that as well. And a little story I have is we went to a restaurant, and there was a big sign that said only one piece of bread per person. And they just threw that out the window as soon as we walked in, and gave us, just kept bringing us bread as much as we wanted. But anyone who would have come in would have only been allowed one piece. And I concur with Todd on that. We had people coming up to the street asking us what we were doing, and really interested, having seen us on the news or whatever. It was nice. It was really unexpected for me.
So in that last slide we were just looking at, Todd, those were Iraqi businessmen, basically?
This slide that's on the screen here now, you mean? They were like the maitre d', I think. One of them was the maitre d' and the other was the assistant manager. That would be my guess, I'm not sure. But they were very helpful and very friendly.
Great.
This was the man, Yosef was his name? Do you remember this fellow on my right?
No, I don't really remember.
Well, I think it was Yosef. Anyway, the flag in the background, you can see the word Gulf, but underneath it is written in German, and this was where those two old ladies that the first picture I showed you, where they were staying, that was their villa or their compound, whatever. This was my first encounter with the Iraqi school children, and for me it was an extremely emotional experience. Several times I just had to turn around or to walk away from the children because of just the powerful emotions that I experienced. That's Bruce Walcott on the left, and Bruce had the same experience, and a number of times we could see as we talked with the children and as rapport and communication developed between us and the children, on several occasions the superintendent of school and the teacher of this particular class of children left the room in tears and left us with the kids. And it was a very powerful time because the children knew that they were in danger or about to be in danger, and we knew that they were about to be in danger.
What's the child in the uniform about?
He's just like any kid in an American classroom. You can see kids, you know, they like military stuff, and
so it's just
there's
a costume?
It's not any official. In this particular instance, I don't think it was any kind of a uniform.
There is a young Baptist party, though.
Yeah.
Is it like Boy Scout type thing, or?
I think it's more of just a young political party. That's what was told to me. I saw, during one of my experiences, I saw a bunch of kids in fatigues, desert fatigues, younger children.
The reason in this case I think it was just something that the children chose to wear is they did not, if you could see the uniforms, they didn't have a uniform. They didn't have name tags or insignias or any of these things that normally go with the uniform. They just had the soldier's hat or the soldier's jacket, pretty much. But it's quite possible. I mean, there was tremendous suppression and control of the people, and I would not be the least bit surprised if what Rick is saying is, if anything, conservative, what they might have done with the youth. I know when I was in the Soviet Union a couple of years ago, the Komsomol was still a very powerful force in the schools, and some of those kids that I saw in uniform in the Soviet Union were 6, 7 years old, you know. We have something similar in the United States. It's called Brownies and Girl Scouts, but there are no political, generally.
No overt political.
Right, exactly. But they're Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts oftentimes do have political implications. This is my last slide, and it's just a particularly moving thing for me to see the faces of these children and to realize that about within 5 days of taking this picture, I heard that the first bombs fell west of Baghdad, approximately in the area where this school is, and that's pretty hard for me to deal with.
And the numbers of children, too. There are a lot of children in the country of Iraq and in Jordan. I spent some time in... that's yours.
Oh,
One more left.
Oh, I had one more. This is the most important one, in that I asked the children a question, and when they raised their hand, I took this picture, and the question I asked them was, how many of you in this room really know somebody who has died because of the blockade, either because of lack of infant formula or lack of medicine? And if you look, you'll see about half of the kids or more raised their hand, and I later questioned them about it, and I'm pretty sure most of them were telling me stories about people they actually knew, because they would say, you know, that it was a cousin or it was somebody close by. That raises one more thing I want to say here before I share this let Rick do his slides, and that is, how did I talk to these people? Well, in this particular class, almost every one of these children spoke English, and most of the class had lived abroad, in other words, outside of Iraq, and about 10 of these kids lived in the United States, and the little boy standing up there on the left had lived in Washington, D.C. for 3 years. I assume his father was with the diplomatic corps. I think that was my last shot there.
Now, it occurs to me as I look at these pictures and the earlier ones of the folks that were with you as part of the Gulf Peace team, there are a lot of smiling faces. Sometimes the mainstream press tends to characterize peace activists as sort of malcontents and, you know, angry people. How did you find the people that were there participating in the Gulf Peace Team project? What kind of folks were they from that perspective?
Oh, there definitely were some angry people there, but what characterizes it is the picture I showed you of the Catholic priest and the two little old ladies. Those type of people of different ages, not necessarily that old, because some of them were younger, but most of the people were well-mannered and were not freaked out in their opposition to the war. They were saying they very much opposed the war, and those of us who were there, including Rick, we risked our life to go into Iraq. I mean, I didn't. The American hostages had just barely gotten out when we went across the border into Iraq. The day I crossed the border by vehicle from driving from Amman, Jordan to Baghdad, there was 1,000 people approximately lined up to get out of Iraq, and there was one vehicle going into Iraq, and that was myself and the 6 other members of the first American delegation. We were with the first American delegation to the Gulf Peace Team. But anyway, I kind of drifted a little bit there, but the people generally were this is what was so, I think, powerful and important about the Gulf Peace Team, is these people represented a great cross-section. They weren't just students, they weren't just radicals or some, you know, but there were some interesting characters floating around in the camp too, as Rick can tell you.
They were.
So, but I don't know if you agree, but I would say, generally speaking, the Gulf Peace Team people, you're talking about a real cross-section.
I met 2 men over there from Indonesia.
Right.
Did you meet? You met them, I believe. They went down to the border on the 13th. They were getting on the bus. And the one was just a teacher, just recently graduated from the university, and felt just really strongly that this was wrong. No direct involvement of his country or anything like that, but he just wanted to come over, and came over with a friend of his to go be a witness or human shield, whatever you want to call it, on the border.
Were there a lot of folks who were not part of the allied countries in the coalition that were a part of the Gulf team? Did you find a number of folks like that?
They were mostly Western, what you would call Western nations, I guess.
But there was a Chinese Buddhist, or there was a Buddhist monk there. I mean, you said people from Indonesia,
but the majority, I think, you could safely say, were from
Probably,
Well, there were a bunch of Italians there,
yeah.
too, and I don't know that Italy was ever directly involved in this.
I have a list on the, but I just offhand I don't
Yeah.
recall, because I just remember there were a lot of different countries, but how many of them were aligned countries from the combined forces, I don't know.
Yeah. Rick, let's take a look at your slides.
Okay. Like you said before, I was there for the same reason as Todd, but took a little different path. We went through Amman, Jordan. First of all, this is a picture of Amman, just a cityscape, if you will, of the older part of the city. Spent a couple days there on each end, the beginning and then at the end. And while we were there, we were acting as, this is where I think we did most of our citizen diplomacy, or I felt like we did got the most results from it. We had a meeting with Prince Hassan of Jordan that lasted about 50 minutes or so, where he came out and spoke to us about many topics, actually, ranging from the state of U.S.-Jordanian relations and how they had changed now that the war had started, to the problem that his country was facing and the world was facing, but his country was bearing the burden for it, of the evacuees and the refugees as a result of this war.
He spoke to your group of 10 people now.
Now, can you go back to that slide
Sure.
for just a second? This is Prince Hassan, and where is he in the governmental structure, would you say? Do you know?
He's the brother of King Hussein. And so he's in the royal family, and this is in the royal palace. We went up there. We were really lucky to be able to get in to a lot of these places and have access to the places that we did. And most of it came from the reputation that FOR has as an international peace group. It's a group that's 75 years old. It's been actively opposing every war, at least the ones in the United States. It's actually international groups, so probably every war that's happened in the past 75 years. And the Iraqi government recognized this, and among all the requests for sponsored groups to come in, the FOR was the one that was chosen to be the sponsored group. So we were actually guests of the Iraqi government. We stayed at the peace camp, same place Todd stayed. They drove us around. We met with government officials there in Iraq. We met with the Speaker of the Parliament and things like this. But anyway, that's how we ended up getting access to the royal palace.
What do you suppose the royal palace thought it had to gain by talking to a group of students and faculty from the United States? It seems like they thought it was pretty important if they're going to send Prince Hassan there to talk to you. Do you have an idea about what they thought they were going to get out of that?
I don't really know. I think just to air some concerns and hear our concerns, because that's basically what he did. He came out and went through, his whole talk to us was on frustrations, enumerating the different frustrations that he had because of this conflict and because of the position he was in a very poor country. I don't know what the benefit was to them, other than just recognizing us. We felt it really lent credibility to us and acknowledged us as a real group that's really doing something important. I think that's what we felt came out of it. We had, like I said, we had press coverage the whole time we were over there. They had the Jordanian news filmed us in this room, and then we were on the news that night, and they talked about our mission. The Iraqi press actually dubbed us messengers of peace on one of the evening broadcasts that we were on.
There are those who are sometimes critical of citizen diplomats and these sorts of efforts where it involves someone going into, quote, enemy territory. And there's the suggestion that's sometimes made that citizen diplomats are either naive about, what is really going on, or that they're dupes of the enemy government. What kind of response do you have to that?
Well, we talked about all those concerns at that beginning meeting that I had talked about previously, and those were real concerns for us, that our presence could be misinterpreted at any of these functions that we went to, especially some of the ones I have slides of later on. And we kind of came to a consensus decision and resolved within ourselves that even if there was an element of being used by, say, the Iraqi government, which there quite possibly was, we didn't have any illusions that it wouldn't be, then that was okay, because we were doing our mission, and they were allowing us to accomplish our mission, and we were able to kind of dictate the circumstances under which we were able to carry out our mission in a lot of cases. So it was a concern, but I think again, you have to go back to the expectations you have of what you want to accomplish as a citizen diplomat, and it isn't a real diplomat, a government diplomat. It's a citizen diplomat, and it's no less important a role, but it's a different function, and people look at you differently and treat you differently because you're not a person associated with the government.
Did you also have a lot of contact with ordinary citizens when you were in Iraq?
Not as much as I would have liked, but a good bit. We spent an afternoon at a university, which you'll see some pictures of. But we didn't really get to walk around as much there, mainly because where the camp was located, we were isolated.
Out of the city.
We weren't in the city. We were, like Todd said, right on the Tigris. It was actually an island. It was surrounded by water. You had to go by bridge to get over to it. So we were isolated there, and I'm sure for the reason of whatever, for the Iraqi government. But the previous two delegations that went over with the FOR stayed as guests of the Iraqi government at the Al Rashid Hotel. So they had a different sort of experience in that.
All right. Well, let's keep going with your slides.
Okay. This is a man named Malawek. He's a Sudanese evacuee that was in Jordan. He had been a carpenter in Kuwait before the invasion, and now he was on his way back with 865,000 other evacuees, refugees.
From Kuwait?
From
Kuwait.
Kuwait. From Kuwait, right, as a result of the invasion. So when the Iraqis invaded, 865,000 foreign nationals were displaced and made their way to Jordan. And that was what Prince Hassan was talking to us about. The burden that a very poor country such as Jordan was having to shoulder with 865,000 people to feed and to house. This is in the background is a tent. They kept these evacuees in tent cities, 6 locations around the country. And all this at the expense of the Jordanian government. Up to the point we were there, it was $55 million.
And what is the status of those folks now? Do you have any idea?
I don't actually know, but I would assume a lot of them are going to be making their way back. At the time of the invasion, the ratio of Kuwaiti citizen to servant, non-citizen, was 3 to 1, non-citizen to servant.
That's the figure that I heard too.
Non-citizen to citizen, excuse me. So they're going to, I think, the structure is there, the culture is there, the society is there. They need these people to come back and work. They do the jobs of the servants in the society. So I think a lot of them will make their way back. But as you may have heard in the news today, Sudan is in the middle of a civil war and a famine at the same time. So he had to go back there, and I hope he makes it back because their life was relatively good there.
So how long were these people able to stay in Jordan itself? He made his way back to the Sudan, or was attempting to. Were all of the other evacuees also attempting to go back to their homelands?
When we first got into the airport, there was a waiting room full of Filipino evacuees. They were waiting for a jet to come from the Philippine government to take them back. So he was waiting in this camp with a bunch of other Sudanese for a plane either paid for by the Sudanese government, or Jordan would send them out to get back. So it was really the burden of Jordanian government to find a way back for them, to contact the government, make arrangements. Just an incredible burden.
Yeah.
And he was really resentful of the way the United States was handling this, and they were getting this influx as a victim in this again, and just shouldering the burden, the costs, without the United States or the United Nations up to this point giving any money to help out with this.
Unfortunately, some of the refugees, well, many of them were from third world countries, from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, Sudan, North Vietnam, and how do you go back to places like that? Like Rick was saying, a lot of them, the place to go back to would have been Kuwait.
You left for a reason. There was nothing to support
there's a
you
reason
there.
why they were already refugees. Now they're double refugees.
Right.
So, Here's a picture in the peace camp in Iraq. These were two of the drivers that we had. I don't know if you met these men or not, Todd. They were
Yeah, I think so.
great. The guy on the left, I nicknamed Mario Andretti because
Yeah.
they drove us around at about
Oh,
120 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Coming from the airport to the camp when we
Right.
first arrived. I don't know if you had that experience or not.
Well, I had the experience of driving for 24 hours over the desert,
jeez.
night and day with these guys, and in Jordan, I'll tell you, that passing uphill on a curve, I mean, it's completely blind, and if somebody came, and oftentimes there would be oncoming traffic, they'd just all beep their horn and
Scatter.
But it would work out, though. That's the amazing thing. I don't know how it
Yeah,
happened.
it was
but
amazing, but I just, I about lost it a few times on that.
So this is in the camp again. This was one of the most interesting experiences that we had. The sign's pretty self-explanatory. It was a human chain that was sponsored by the Iraqi government, and it was the initial idea for it came from a New Zealand woman who was one of the international peace people. She went to the Organization of Friendship, Peace, and Solidarity, which was the sponsoring organization for all the peace people in the country, and said, let's have this human chain.
Yeah, I met her, I
The
think.
New Zealand woman?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember her name right now, but they agreed to do this, and it was modeled after the human chain that took place in Jerusalem about 2 years ago, with Palestinians and Jews and international peace people all linking hands in a show of solidarity.
There were
and
people
peace.
from Missoula in that.
Is that right? So this was modeled after that, and we took part in this. This was a point when we really had to address the issues that you were just discussing of being used and feeling used, because this was a potential to misinterpret our presence at a rally that we were very sure was going to be staged to a great degree by the Iraqi government for their own purposes, and it was. But it also allowed for us to have our own separate celebration, if you will, of peace after the stage demonstration took place. I have some more pictures of that. This is just driving along in the bus of Iraqi school kids. That's who they had bussed out to take place in this. They had them come out of school to come participate in this. And this photograph is at the entrance to the American Embassy during the demonstration. Like I said, there were two distinct demonstrations going on at the time, or that actually didn't overlap, but took place at different times. There was a very pro-Iraqi stage demonstration, and then there was ours. And what we ended up doing while the very anti-American demonstration was going on was joining hands with all the Iraqi school kids that were around us and circling around this. Whoops, sorry about that. This picture shows us joining hands. That's the man with the beard there was part of our delegation. His name's Joshua. And then this woman is German with the sign. I don't know if you recognize her or not. She was part of the international peace team, the Gulf Peace Team. And we joined hands kind of in response to this very vocal anti-American demonstration going on. And we joined hands and we're singing, all we're saying is give peace a chance, in response to this demonstration that was going on behind us. It was a wonderful experience. We also felt very strongly and had an opportunity to state it at the rally that took place after we had this demonstration of holding hands, that we were very disappointed that the United States Embassy had decided to pull out and leave on the 12th and give up any chance for a diplomatic solution. So we made statements to that effect as well. And this shot is a picture of the entrance to Al-Mastansariya University, which is one of the 4 universities in Baghdad. We were fortunate enough to be able to spend an afternoon there meeting with students and student leaders. And since then, I've found through various channels talking to people at FOR that this university has been heavily bombed and is virtually destroyed for whatever reason. Still don't know exactly why. Can't figure it out in my own mind, but I hope it was just an accident. That's how I kind of dealing with that one. And there's a man from Bozeman, another Montana peace person, who's over there right now with an FOR group.
Paul Dix.
Paul Dix, right. As he's a professional photographer from Bozeman, and I spoke with him before I left and told him where I had my photographs and asked him if he could go and get pictures of these. So if he's able to do that, we might have some before and after shots, which would really make it even more visual and powerful. This is the University Center, or Student Union building at the university. We spent a lot of time in there speaking with one of the student leaders. Like I said, he was the leader of the National Union of Iraqi Student and Youth, NUSI, they called it, which was the student organization on the campus, responsible for organizing marches and rallies and organizing military drills on the weekends, having parties as well, social events and things like that. A very modern university. Education in Iraq is free, socialized. It's available to everyone who is able to pass tests. They have tests to get to each level, and if you get past the test, you can go all the way through PhD with the free education. And that was one of the points that was brought up to us from the students that we spoke with here. They were bringing up all the good points of what Saddam Hussein had done for the country, the revamping the educational system, bringing literacy up to 97%, having socialized medicine, and things like this. And they really weren't aware of the terrible atrocities that we are very aware of, because we do have a much more free society, and they just haven't heard of these things and deny them very vehemently, that this could be a possibility, that he had gassed the Kurds, or that people had died in the invasion of Kuwait, things like that. They didn't want to believe.
So it sounds like you were not restricted in any way in what you were able to discuss with them. Was that true?
Right. We went to the university, met with the leader of the National Union of Iraqi Student and Youth, and then we're given an hour. And the reason we're given an hour is because it was our own time restriction. We had to be somewhere else. And they just said, go anywhere you want. They suggested we go to the foreign language college at the university, because we found a lot of English-speaking people. It was a really good idea. But no one was watching us. We just, anyone who wanted to speak with us. I had 10 people gathered around wanting to hear what I had to say, but I was trying to really listen and hear what they had to say. That was one of the most interesting experiences and rewarding experiences that we had, just to really get a sense of what they were thinking. This was on the 13th of January, so in 2 days was the deadline. They were very aware of that, very questioning of me as to why we wanted to bomb them. They didn't, because they don't look at the invasion of Kuwait as an issue, so they didn't know why we were wanting to bomb them and go to war with them, and asking me that.
What do you mean that they don't look upon the invasion of Kuwait as an issue?
They're taught from day one in the Iraqi school system that Kuwait is part of Iraq. It's the 19th province. It always has been and always will be, and it will be liberated one day. So the students that I spoke with, now granted I only spoke with 4 or 5 of them specifically on this topic, told me exactly that Kuwait was liberated, and that their perception of the situation in the invasion were that there was no violence, that it was they were invited in almost by the by the Kuwaiti government to liberate this and make it part of Iraq again.
Kuwait, I talked to a Kuwait refugee who seemed to be very knowledgeable, and he told me that Kuwait was part of Iraq until about 1920 or 24, I can't remember the exact date, but Great Britain, just of its own volition, separated Kuwait from Iraq. So what Rick is saying is true. A lot of the people in Iraq still either remember or have been taught that Kuwait is indeed a part of Iraq. And this is one of the important things that came out of all this, that we got to hear a little bit about their story, and that's very important, because if you're going to do anything at all with the Middle East, you've got to understand, who's been doing what here over the years.
Is that an important part of how you see your own roles as citizen diplomats, that you're able to give a more historical perspective than what is generally transmitted through the news media in the United States?
I think it's important. I certainly had no idea until I went to the Middle East. I could probably, if I had an essay test right now, do about 100 things that I learned on this that I should have already known about the world, but I didn't.
Did you have a similar experience, Rick?
I do think that's very important. I think that's one of the most important things, if not the most important thing I see as a duty of or goal of being a citizen diplomat, is to not pass a value judgment. I don't pass value judgments on whether or not they think Kuwait is part of Iraq. I just want to know what they're thinking.
Right.
I want to know, okay, you think it's part of Iraq, so maybe that's why you're acting the way you are. I'm not going to say, oh, you know, well, you're just wrong. That wasn't my job. That wasn't why I was there. But I really understand a lot better after knowing what angle they're coming from, what fundamental assumptions they're starting from. Then you can say, well, this is why they're acting like this, or this is how they could follow a madman, because this is what they think. And that, I think that's where diplomacy fails, is it doesn't go to that level and say, what are the people thinking? It deals in absolutes. It says, well, history says this and this and this. But history doesn't mean anything. If a nation of peoples believe one thing, it's true for them. History doesn't, you know, history is in the eye of the beholder. So that was an interesting revelation for me.
We're running a little low on time, and I'm wondering, the war has happened, basically. What you had hoped to be a part of preventing did indeed transpire. What do you see as your roles now as citizen diplomats? Do you see a further role for yourself in the Middle East? What do you see doing from here on out?
Well, I'm on my way back to Kazakhstan this summer. This time my wife will be with me. There's tremendous turmoil now in the Soviet Union. Virtually all of the republics are threatening to or have voted to secede from the Soviet Union. I'm going back there not so much as a citizen diplomat, just to see some very good friends now, some of the guys that have come to America because of our initial trip. And I guess I want to say one thing in conclusion, and that is what I hope to do in the future as a citizen diplomat is maybe move a little quicker than we did, because the war had almost started when I got to Iraq. There wasn't much time, but if we could have gotten in there earlier, say a year ago, and begin, like the school children that I met, wanted to meet American school children, the mothers, everyone was interested in you know, meeting people in the United States, and if we could have gotten some of those exchanges going a year earlier, it might have made a difference.
How about you, Rick?
Well, I've crossed the line and now I'm involved in it, and I enjoy being involved in it. And I've felt very strongly the past couple of weeks that I really want to make a trip back, a reconciliation mission back to Baghdad, to Iraq, and also to Jordan. I'm very concerned about the country of Jordan. I see bad things in its future because of the Palestinian population. 65% of the population is Palestinian, and I want to go back and make contact with those people that I met when I was over there this last time.
And meanwhile, you are available with your slideshow for anybody that might want to take a look at it.
Especially the schools.
Schools, okay, and they get in contact with you through the university? Is that how you?
Economics department at
Okay.
the university.
Great.
Message.
Okay, good. Todd, are you available with your slides also for folks?
Yes, and I have had the opportunity to talk to a number of groups already.
Great.
So, and I'm very happy to share with that.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both very, very much for your efforts. I think you went as ambassadors, so to speak, from this part of the country, and there are many of us who are very appreciative that you did so. Thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
being here today.
Thank you.